A beloved teacher is stabbed to death in her sleep. Police say the man who stabbed her to death was her own son. We're breaking down what happened and what the alleged killer said to police about why he killed his mom. Thanks so much for joining us on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. Lara Lyons is described as dedicated, compassionate, and someone whose teaching touched countless lives. When news came down that she was murdered, it shocked her community, especially when they found out her son allegedly confessed to the crime. In October of last year, Lara Lyons posted this sweet message about her 19-year-old son, Connor. She wrote on social media, "Thank you, Connor. You and William are the best sons in the world. Now I have a bridge." Much of her social media page is filled with sweet photos about her kids and featured photos of her son, Connor. 7 months after Lara made that post about Connor, she was dead, killed allegedly by the very son she appeared to adore. But what happened? On May 23rd, deputies with the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana were dispatched to a local home. Dispatchers reportedly said they got a 911 call from someone who said, "My brother killed my mother." And this didn't happen in the wee morning hours. Deputies were called a little after 2 p.m. Why is that important? I'll explain in a sec. By the time deputies arrived to Lara's home, she was tragically already dead. And her son Connor, unlike some suspects, didn't run or flee. Deputies found him on the back steps of the home. They handcuffed him, advised him of his Miranda rights, and he was taken into custody. Now, we tried to get our hands on the full criminal complaint. However, because the case is still active, the Sheriff's Department declined our request. It's unclear what happened in the lead up to the murder, but here's what we do know according to local reports. Connor allegedly told investigators that he was hearing voices. It's unclear if Connor had a history of mental health issues, if that was the first time he experienced that. All of that we just don't know. Connor allegedly told authorities he stabbed his mom 3 times, and the stabs were in horrific spots too, right into Lara's neck. Now, I mentioned earlier that the timing was interesting. Deputies were dispatched at 2:11 p.m. on May 23rd, but Connor allegedly told investigators he did this while his mom was sleeping. Now, obviously, I'm not a detective or anything, but in my head, I'm thinking one of 2 things happened. He either stabbed her while she was napping or stabbed her the night before and just left her there. Again, we just don't know. We know that Lara's body was reportedly found in her bed. When reports came out about her murder, it rocked her community. There are tons of comments under a Facebook post shared by Mansfield High School, where she was a teacher. Some comments say, "Rest in peace, Miss Lyons." Others are filled with broken heart emojis. One comment says, "Having known Lara my whole life and having taught with her at MHS, I can say she loved nothing more. She loved MHS and loved her kids. We often talked about our babies. She will remain a light in the lives of all those she touched. Thank you for honoring my beautiful friend. I know she's smiling her beautiful smile with our Lord." The school itself posted this message, which reads, "In loving memory of Miss Lara Lyons. It is with profound sadness that we share the passing of Miss Lara Lyons, a beloved teacher at Mansfield High School. Miss Lyons was a dedicated educator, a compassionate colleague, and a cherished member of the DeSoto Parish Schools family. Her commitment to her students and passion for teaching touched countless lives, and her absence will be deeply felt across our school community. We extend our heartfelt condolences to Miss Lyons' family, friends, students, and fellow educators. Our thoughts and prayers are with all those who are grieving this immense loss." As for Connor, he's been behind bars since his arrest in May, and just this week, a grand jury officially indicted him for his mom's murder. KSLA reports that the first indictment charged the 19-year-old with second-degree murder. A second indictment charged Connor with 2 separate counts of battery of a police officer and resisting an officer. So we have a grand jury indictment. Next question is, will this case go to trial? I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Safa, always great to have you on and always great to see you. You know, I'm curious, if Connor Lyons' arrest happened back in May, why are we just now getting a grand jury indictment in August?
Sometimes it takes time for the prosecution to impanel a grand jury and actually put the evidence before them. Now, there are grand jurors that sit, in secrecy throughout proceedings, and depending on the state, the rules of grand jury proceedings vary. Louisiana is certainly somewhat different than New York here, but they have their grand jurors. The prosecution will issue subpoenas of information or things that they look to obtain to put into grand jury, and then they will call their witnesses to come in and testify before the grand jury. They may have needed to wait for the medical examiner's report toxicology information and things like that, specific to the cause and or manner of death. That information will need to be presented to the grand jury by way of the medical examiner and other things that they may have needed to wait on or wait for. But certainly it's not surprising here that although his arrest occurred in May, that we are now having an indictment months later.
And it seems like sometimes we're always kind of thinking it's like CSI where things happen just very quickly, maybe next day, but it makes a lot of sense that it would happen a couple weeks down the line. And what are your thoughts on Connor's alleged confession where he admitted to stabbing his mom in her sleep?
That confession is definitely something that the prosecution will and intends to use to seek a conviction in this case. The defense is, of course, going to challenge that, and I think there will be a number of challenges in this case. First and foremost, his mental capacity and his ability to proceed to trial and understand the proceedings as they are moving forward towards that trial. In New York, here we have something called 730. Louisiana has something very similar where if a person is deemed competent or incompetent, then the case will be suspended for a period of time until that person regains competency. And a lot of times in very odd situations or odd cases, especially when you've got the murders of, a mother or children or things of that nature, and it's something that we don't typically see very often, the defense attorneys or the judge and the prosecution will all agree on that competency exam. If the case proceeds forward, then there will be a challenge to the statements that the defendant or Mr. Lyons in this case has made to law enforcement, specifically that admission. And there will be hearings with respect to whether or not that admission was voluntary or if there should have been some Miranda and things of that nature. And there will be a hearing on that issue.
And it's been reported that Connor was hearing voices when he allegedly stabbed his mom. Do you think that kind of mitigates anything in terms of what he allegedly did?
I don't think that it's going to necessarily mitigate, but it's going to provide context as to what was going on in his mind at the time this occurred. And again, if we're looking at an individual who does have some sort of mental disease or defect and had the inability to truly appreciate what was going on at the moment and what that person was doing at the moment, that's certainly something that will come into play as this case proceeds.
And it seems like from what I gathered and kind of learned through social media, which I know only kind of tells one piece of the story, but it seems like that Lara Lyons, the mom, was really just loved and adored by pretty much everyone. And most times when we see these types of cases, something huge happen, like an argument or something else. But from what we know, it just feels so random. If this case were to ever go to trial, do you think that jurors want to hear why this happened? Does that even matter in terms of the law? What are your thoughts?
I think jurors are going to want to understand what was going on in Mr. Lyons' mind at the time that this incident occurred, and really find out why this happened. And of course, this may be a case that might hinge on the battle of the experts, whether or not this person was competent, whether they could formulate the correct culpable mental state for this murder charge or for this homicide charge. It may ultimately be a battle of the experts and whether or not this person did have the appropriate culpable mental state to sustain the charges and find a guilty verdict, or if they did not have that required culpable mental state. And so the jury is going to have to consider that, their mental state, and the judge will instruct them on how to do that.
And as a criminal defense attorney, going back to what we were just discussing, how much does it hurt his defense since he already allegedly made incriminating statements?
It most definitely hurts the defense, significantly, unless the defense is able to get that confession excluded. If they can't get it excluded, then that information is coming in, and it'll be interesting to see what position they take on the case. Are they saying, he's not guilty and he didn't do it, and the confession was just a faulty confession, or was there some sort of mental disease or defect that caused him to commit this act? And as a result of that, he made the admission, but maybe the admission wasn't appropriately made. Maybe there weren't Miranda rights that were read in the appropriate manner, things of that nature that will be challenged by the defense. But I think overall, it certainly hurts the defense in this case.
And with the information that we have now, Safa, do you think that second-degree murder fits this case?
Absolutely, most definitely. And different states, again, do things differently. And most common in the state of New York, here we use murder in the second degree when individuals are charged in a context such as this. Other states, Louisiana, Texas, they use second degree murder, but they also have the ability to use first degree murder. But I think that the facts and circumstances surrounding this case are fitting for a second degree murder, in which I believe that this individual is looking to spend the rest of his life in jail. And there is a question, and I'm not completely sure on if this is a death qualifying offense in the state of Louisiana.
And just kind of reading through again with the limited information that's been released by officials so far, just knowing that Connor allegedly confessed to stabbing his mom in the neck while she was sleeping. In my mind, what was running through my head, like one of two things could have happened. Either she was taking a nap and something happened, then she was stabbed, or this happened overnight and her body was just kind of laying there for a while before eventually 911 was called and deputies arrived to the scene. But my question for you, Safa, is are you surprised that given the allegations against Lara Lyons that he didn't run or try to flee? When deputies found him, he was just on the back steps of the home.
Again, this case is somewhat bizarre, so it's not surprising that he didn't attempt to flee. But what I do know, I do believe, is that there were some additional charges that were lodged against him specific to some sort of evading arrest or battery against one of the officers. So that may, put into context what his frame of mind is. He may have been sitting there waiting for them to respond. And once they got there, he maybe got upset and attempted to flee or have some sort of, negative interaction with law enforcement. But again, considering the very odd facts, and I know these things unfortunately do happen, but they're not normal, and I don't think that any of us want to normalize this type of behavior. It's very bizarre that this person would continue to sit there and be present, knowing that they just allegedly murdered their mother and could spend the rest of their life in prison.
Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking overall, especially because the victim in this case, she was so beloved. I think around the time that this had occurred, that she was about to go on summer vacation because she had a job as a teacher, about to enjoy her summer, and then this happened. And Safa, I'm curious, do you see this case going to trial even after Lara Lyons' alleged confession, or do you see that possibly a deal may be had and that he could plead out?
In this case, I'm going to expect that there's going to be a plea deal that's made, and he'll probably plead out. Considering the facts and circumstances, this is a case that no defense attorney really wants to put in front of a jury, and no prosecutor is really going to want to have to re-victimize other people that may be related to this woman, maybe siblings and things of that nature. No case is a slam dunk case for either side. So considering all things, I think that we will more than likely see a plea on this case.
Any possibility of a not guilty by reason of insanity? Do you see that being a plea that he enters?
That's always a possibility, and it may not be a plea that is entered, but ultimately a determination by the jury. Always a possibility, but then what happens next? Will he still be detained pending psychological evaluations and competency? And, in the state of New York, there are certain things that occur even if a person is not competent. There will be other procedures that are taken into effect that will hold an individual in the psychiatric units when things like this do occur.
Yeah, and we've seen it all here at Law and Crime, right? Where we've seen cases where defendants have pleaded not guilty, and then the second jury selection starts, and all of a sudden there's a guilty plea. But we just never know, because as of right now, no plea has been entered yet. Connor still has to be arraigned sometime next week. Well, Safa Robinson, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you for having me, as always.
Thanks for being on with us. I appreciate you, Safa. Thank you so much. Lara Lyons remains in the Caddo Correctional Center on a $2 million bond. He hasn't entered a plea yet. He's scheduled to be arraigned next week. Thanks so much for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner.